let's get to some takeaways from fall camp, huh? Because there was a lot of things we noticed, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts, but we each only chose 3. Eric, so let's start with you here. What are your 3 takeaways from fall camp?
Well, my number 1 takeaway is that this defense has chemistry despite all the moving parts. When you have a team that has gone through all of the things that this roster has gone through as far as turnover and changing pieces, it shocked me to see how gelled and how much they were just in it for each other. And it wasn't just an on-the-field thing. Well, that was definitely part of it. I think the defense has by far and away walked away from this camp as the strongest side of the ball, the strongest unit, bar none.
No doubt.
I think they have the most depth, and I do believe they have the most chemistry. And you could tell by the way that they root for each other off the field, the way they are talking to each other, the way that a lot of these leaders are coming from the defensive side. This chemistry on the defensive side of the football for Arizona State University will pay massive dividends, because how do you overcome not playing together for a long time? How do you overcome? Listen, we think this Arizona State roster is more talented than we were last year. There are other people who are looking at this as the worst team in the Big 12. A lot of people. Yeah. How do you overcome that? You play off of each other beautifully. You play with each other and you enhance each other's strengths.
Fired up, man.
Okay?
Just fired up.
This defense is in the position to do that. That was by far and away my biggest takeaway. Do you want me to go through my 3?
Let's go through all of them, man. So you're just on a fucking roll here.
Let's go through number 2, okay? This is a good and a bad takeaway for number 2. Sam Leavitt's arm power. Okay, this is part of the reason why he has a starting job, but not the only reason. This can be a blessing and a curse, okay? And let's focus on the blessing first.
Okay, the cannon.
This dude has a freaking arm.
Yeah.
Man, this dude can sling it. He has the potential to make some massive plays downfield and has some extremely speedy wide receivers that can help make those plays. That is something that this offense desperately needs as it is going to emphasize the run game so much, right? There is a negative to it, which is the fact that he needs to control that power, right? Overthrows have been a very big theme for him in camp. I think he's gotten better, but I don't think he's there. And I am looking for him throughout this season to be able to rein that in, because they're not going to call him that deep ball often. So it's not like he's going to get a ton of in-game practice with it. But when it is time to deliver that, he has every tool in the world to deliver that pass. It is now on him to hone that in and to deliver it correctly in the right spot and at the right time. If he can do that, this offense is completely unlocked.
Yeah.
That was my second biggest takeaway. And then let's go to takeaway number 3. It was just the depth, right? We talked about it so many times, position battles, who's fighting for 1s, 2s, 3s at this point. The fact that Troy is 3, as far as he was out with the 3s today as wide receivers go, just goes to show you how much this room has changed, despite even losing. They've lost a majority of their top-end talent from last year.
Or what was evaluated as
their top-end talent.
Yeah, Elijah Badger,
Elijah Badger, obviously being the main part of that. Jaden Rashada, of course, also being a main part of that, despite maybe what's going on now. You know, still as far as when we were assessing things, he was in that conversation.
Yeah.
There is depth at basically every single room. There are a couple of players that you can consistently look at and say, I know why you're here and I can see you playing and making an impact. There's depth on the offensive line, the wide receiver room, the running back room, the safeties, the corners, the defensive line. You know, there's a couple of positions where you're looking at, okay, I don't know exactly who's going to step up and be that person, but it's a massive difference from last season, and that it gets me obviously hyped. So those are my big 3 takeaways.
Take a breath,
those are my 3 big takeaways.
Jeez, man, just pew, pew, pew. You're firing those things
Jonathan
off
Gannon.
there.
Pew, pew,
I
explosives. Pew, pew, pew.
I love it. I love it. Look, our takeaways are a little different. So let's go ahead and get into my first takeaway. And that does involve the defense, kind of like you were talking about the defensive chemistry. For me, the first takeaway is the defense is going to keep ASU in a lot of games this season. Whether the offense decides it's going to produce or not, Arizona State's defense, the depth, the chemistry, the star power among transfers, the development and guys that were here last year is going to be massive when you get to games like Kansas, Utah, Kansas State, even Arizona at the end of the season. I think this defense is going to prevent teams from being able to truly blow out Arizona State, which in that case is going to make life a lot easier on the offense if you don't always have to claw back from a massive deficit. If you're down 10, that's fine. If you're down 7, that's fine. If you have a lead, that's obviously even better. And that ASU defense is going to ensure that that Sun Devil offense has the time to build a little bit of chemistry, to get into a little bit of a rhythm. And you're going to see that week 1, week 2, week 3, and really throughout the entire season. Again, the chemistry has been a big part of that, and that's why that takeaway is what it is. But my second takeaway, this one is something that we've kind of been preaching throughout fall camp, and it's that you guys need to get used to a rotation at wide receiver, linebacker, and of course at corner as well. That depth really cycles in to this takeaway, because when you talk about the linebackers specifically, we've seen Cyrus Fiaseu, we've seen Jordan Crook, we've seen Keyshawn Elliott, we've seen Kavion Thunderbird, we've seen Tate Romney, and you guys are going to see those guys just about every single game. I would expect to at least see 4 of those guys every single game. Of course, this is if everybody stays healthy. You should feel confident that at least in the 2 deep, a guy like Caleb McCullough, who we haven't even really talked about this camp, is also going to be getting in some action. Those transfers, obviously, Fiaseu, Crook, and Keyshawn Elliott are going to be massive. I was telling somebody out there today that Jordan Crook has really been super impressive and kind of surprising, to be completely honest with you. You knew that you were getting a linebacker from the SEC who didn't necessarily play a ton of reps at linebacker last season. And the fact of the matter is he's had just a phenomenal fall camp. And spring ball as well, to the point now where he is certainly going to be in the rotation, if not a starting linebacker. And then at wide receiver, we talked a little bit about it earlier in the show. You're going to see Jake Smith, even though he's not starting. You're going to see Troy O'Meara, even though he's not starting. You are going to see Xavier Guillory, even though he's not starting. And those are just a couple of the names that you can expect to see at wide receiver. Somebody brought it up out at camp practice today. I wouldn't be surprised if there's not a giant gap in receiving numbers this season among the wide receivers, because you are going to have so many guys trickling in and out to keep those legs fresh. And you got a lot of talent at wide receiver that all offer different unique skill sets that could be beneficial to this offense. And then, of course, at corner, we've already talked about Shamari Simmons stepping up in that rotation with Cole Martin for the nickel spot after the retirement of Mason Williams. You know that you've got guys like LaTerrence Welch, Keontez Bradley, Rodney Bimage in the secondary that are likely going to back up guys like a Javen Robinson, going to back up a Keith Abney, who I know is juiced. Talked to him after practice today. So that's a big part of what you're going to see that Arizona State didn't have last season, is that you're going to see rotation. You're going to see guys at the end of the year, and you're going to be like, why didn't they have better numbers?
Right.
And it's because their coaches were doing the right thing in keeping them fresh. Now, don't get me wrong. If a guy's having a night, he's going to be in there. Like, that's just football. But until those moments happen, feel confident that you have enough guys out there to really provide this team with some depth. And my final takeaway of camp, kind of what we talked a little bit about earlier, the offensive tackles need to prove themselves. And at this point, you can't do it in practice. You got to do it in the game. At right tackle, whether that be Matt Max or Emmett Boley, if he ends up playing right tackle. On the left end, whether that be Emmett, Josh Atkins, doesn't matter. These guys haven't necessarily totally run away with the jobs in camp. That has probably been made clear based off of what we saw from Atkins today at left tackle. Mm-hmm. At this point, you're not going to be able to prove it in practice. You got to go out there in a game. You got to do it against Wyoming. You got to do it against an SEC team in Mississippi State. You got to do it against a good group of 5 school in Texas State. And then obviously when conference play comes, you got to do it against some really talented Big 12 defenses as well. This offense, yes, it's only going to be as good as Sam Leavitt is, but Sam Leavitt is only going to be as good as those offensive tackles are. He could use an extra second, right? He could use an extra 2 seconds. Especially as a young quarterback still going into his first year of the system, new talent around him, new offensive coordinator, a new coach for him. So those offensive tackles are going to be huge to the success of this team. But those are our takeaways from fall camp. Let us know in the comments what you think. Again, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button.
We all silly like the mayor.